The lubricating oil flow begins as oil is drawn from the oil pan through the suction tube. The suction tube delivers oil to the gerotor-type lubricating oil pump. The gerotor-type lubricating oil pump is mounted at the front of the cylinder block and gear-driven from the front of the crankshaft. The oil pump is driven through a straight-cut spur gear. The pump then delivers the lubricating oil through an internal drilling to the oil cooler cover and the pressure regulator valve. When the oil pressure from the pump exceeds the pressure regulator valve opening pressure, the valve opens, uncovering the dump port and allowing some oil to drain back through the cover to the inlet side of the oil pump. Recirculating the oil back to the pump increases the supply of oil to the pump. This circuit assures a constant oil supply without cavitation at high engine speeds. At the same time, oil is directed to a cast-in passage in the oil cooler cover, leading to the oil cooler element. At normal operating temperature, the minimum oil pressure at idle is 10 psi. At rated speed, the minimum pressure is 30 psi. The oil cooler element cools the oil as it is moved through the plates and coolant is passed on the outside of the plates. The oil then continues through another cast passage in the oil cooler cover to the oil filter. The Fleetguard Stratapore oil filter reduces the restriction of oil flow and extends the oil drain interval. In the event of a plugged filter, the cooler cover incorporates a bypass valve to maintain oil flow. If the pressure drop across the oil filter exceeds 50 psi, the bypass valve opens, allowing unfiltered oil to lubricate the engine. The oil flows up the center of the filter and into the filter head. Once the oil is cooled and filtered, oil flow is divided, with a portion of the oil flowing to the turbocharger. One cross-drilling between cylinder number 1 and cylinder number 2 carries the oil across the block to an angle drilling that intersects the main oil rifle. The transfer drilling connected to the main oil rifle supplies oil to a groove in the upper main bearing shells. Oil is then supplied to the cam bores through short radial drillings. The piston pins are splash lubricated by the piston cooling nozzle spray. From the main bearings, oil enters the crankshaft and lubricates the connecting rod bearings through internal cross drillings. If the engine utilizes saddle jet piston cooling nozzles, oil from the main bearings is directed to the nozzles and then sprayed onto the pistons. Oil for the J-jet piston cooling nozzles is delivered through a second cross drilling connected to the piston cooling rifle. Oil to the overhead is carried to the cylinder head deck by individual vertical drillings, one per cylinder, intersecting the main oil rifle. The oil then continues to flow vertically through drillings in the cylinder head. From the drillings in the cylinder head, oil flows through a groove in the bottom of the pedestal plate. The oil then flows around the rocker lever mounting cap screws to the rocker shafts. Oil flows through angle drillings in the cap screw bore in the shaft. At each end of the shaft, a drilling allows oil to flow from the inside diameter of the shaft to the rocker lever bore. A lubrication groove in each end of the shaft directs oil to two drillings, providing a path for oil flow. One drilling directs oil flow to the foot pad that contacts the crosshead. Oil from this drilling then travels down the crosshead and lubricates the valve stems. The second drilling in the rocker lever directs oil to the adjusting screw. Oil flow around the adjusting screw lubricates the push tube sockets. The front gear train assembly receives lubrication from oil splash and oil carryover. The oil pump idler gear is pressure lubricated. From here, the oil drains back to the pan for recirculation. The main oil rifle feeds oil to the rear housing. A channel in the block side of the housing feeds the oil to internal drillings in the housing to supply oil to the air compressor.